originally thought this is going to make me less optimistic because I thought I'm so optimistic about humanity. I love humanity. I thought this probably is going to make me less optimistic, and it actually made me more optimistic. You and I are in a lifetime right now where we either destroy ourselves or we make it through, and I'm 95% certain that we'll make it through, but it makes me not feel worried that there's a 5% chance that we destroy ourselves through nuclear weapons or something. We need to be very intentional in this moment with AI, quantum computing, brain-computer interfaces, robotics, rapidly accelerating, exponentially accelerating, and say what kind of world do we want to create? And I think in this lifetime we can create heaven on earth.
Austin will go through kind of a rebirth.
Most advanced technology in the world, and if you can't actually build it or ship it, then what's the point?
You need storytellers who are able to paint the picture of what's happening at the frontiers of technology.
The U.S. needs to get back more to that and less like lawyerish and more we're building stuff.
The frontier isn't just a place, it's forged in the fire. Welcome to Austin Next.
Brett, welcome back to Austin Next.
Hey, thanks so much. It's good to see you, buddy.
Oh yeah, like this is now, you now hold the record by yourself. This is the fourth time on.
Okay,
so
but
you're
it's also been with co-guest.
Yes.
Which has been super fun.
But
one
no.
with Worley, one with Byron Reese, and was I on?
The first one was
just solo.
It was solo,
yeah.
Then with Worley, and then with Byron.
Yeah.
And so
two great friends, and they've now been on the Love Conquers Fear podcast.
Yeah, and I'm sure as soon as Worley sees this come out, he's going to get rather pissed because he's the person you just broke the tie with.
No, oh no.
So he's going to call me up and be like, "All right, we got to do."
He's awesome.
But no, I'm really excited to talk about the book, and I read it, and it's amazing and
awesome.
But I'm going to start off at the very top. So we talked about, it's Love Conquers Fear.
Yeah.
And I want you to define love and fear in this, because when I went in my definition of the kind of the standard definition of fear, it felt different than the way you were using it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how would you?
Yeah, and love is a very complex word and concept too.
Yeah.
A lot of people think of the word love as sexualized or romantic, and sometimes love is very hard. I just keynoted a conference that my publisher hosts every year. It's their 7th annual conference for it. 7 is my divine number, so meant to be, and they made the conference theme Love Conquers Fear, Together We Rise.
Oh, nice.
And I opened that up with defining love, and I gave an example of an executive that I worked with who I found out prior to the Bizarre Voice IPO was going behind employees' heads, thumping them on their neck and saying, "You're a fucking idiot." And I thought, this is absolutely horrible, and I fired them the next day. And I was very transparent with the company on why I fired them, much to the chagrin of HR. But I was like, look, people need to know the truth about what's tolerated and not here. And it was A, an act of love, and B, the person, when I fired them, immediately they said, "You're going to be a hero." And I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And they said, "You're doing the right thing." And they went to go get therapy, and they turned their whole life around.
Oh, that's great.
This has almost never happened, by the way.
Usually it's how dare you, I'm right. Yeah.
Right. Usually there's like a lot of armor and everything else, but I think that they realized in that moment through a mirror, like what they needed to work on. And we're friends to this day.
Wow.
Like it's almost never happened like this. So, fear is one of those tricky things too. It is okay to have the amygdala, which is the fear-based center of our brain, extremely well developed because of the scarcity that we faced as Homo sapiens. We've been around for 300,000 years on a planet that's 4.54 billion years old. Our sun is 4.6 billion years old. So it's interesting. The sun was born in a universe of 13.8 billion years old. And then quickly the Earth
babies.
was born,
Yeah.
right? So we're babies evolutionarily. And, you could say we're derivative of hominids, which have been around for 4 million years. But no matter what, we've been around for very little time. And our brain biology has developed to have a very well-developed fear center. And that fear center helped us survive during the times where we didn't have electricity. We were living in caves. We really were incredibly at threat, like a saber-toothed tiger could eat us or whatever else, right?
The people who evolved and survived are the ones who were like, the shaking of the bush probably is something bad, versus the ones that are like, it's fine.
Okay, so we actually talked about Byron Reese. So I think it was episode 12 of the Love Conquers Fear podcast. He said, you realize, Brett, that we're the ones that evolved from the Homo sapiens that said, that's a bear, let's run, versus the Homo sapiens that said, that's a bear, or that might be a bear, like whatever, and they got eaten.
Right.
And so we have this very highly developed fear center, and it really did help us. The problem is that today, that fear center is getting algorithmically hijacked all the time by social media, by the media. This is not a critique of the free press. It's a critique of the business model of the free press. The free press business model is such that the lazy approach, and it really is a lazy approach, and it's the same thing with social media, it's a lazy approach, is if I want to wake you up and get you to click, click, click like a mouse in a maze looking for cheese, the easiest way for me to do that is to scare you. And it's because of the way we evolved. And look, I'm a huge fan of capitalism, and the capitalist argument is always like, we give people what they want. But the reality is that I think you and I would agree, especially having kids, that it is an algorithmic decision by social media companies to say, I'm going to make teenage girls depressed. I'm going to make them constantly compare against each other. That is a decision. It is for sure a decision. It's a lazy decision because basically it's just hijacking the biological center that is a weakness in our bodies, which was a strength at one point in time. It's not a big strength now, although there are times where you need to go into total animal mode.
Sure.
Like let's say that literally there is a shooter, then your animal instincts need to wake up fast, and you need to get, I had that recently with someone who we literally saved their life. It wasn't a shooter, but it was a life-threatening situation. I just went into total command and control mode, got an EMS there, that person's life is saved. And so sometimes it serves us, but being able to realize that we're living in this world where we've created the matrix. I'm not talking about the matrix of the movie. I'm talking about this programmatic, world of the pharmaceutical complex, which is keeping us in an addictive state. If you saw Brian Hubbard on episode 53 of my podcast, he's the CEO of Americans for Ibogaine, he was standing right next to President Trump when President Trump signed that executive order to fast track psychedelic assisted therapy. He saw for 15 years in Kentucky just people ravaged by opioids. It was the constant pharmaceutical complex and the legal complex to prey on people. That is a really disturbing episode. And you realize, man, this guy, he is a freaking force of nature. He's a mountain of a man, too. We were talking about Arena Hall before he went on stage here. And that's where I'm going to have the book launch. We're recording this prior to June 23rd. And, I had lunch with him there. We also hosted Governor Perry and Brian Hubbard for September 11th of last year to raise money for Americans for Ibogaine. And that guy is he is absolutely going to save these lives for the vets. And so is Governor Perry. And so this fear center is something that we need to get to a point where we have an inner journey to be able to realize the programs running in our own mind, then decide whether or not those programs serve us, deprogram and reprogram with what does, and add on new programs. And, I know I'm talking about this in a programmatic way, and I don't believe we're living in a technological simulation or anything, but our brains are incredible technology. I was at a meditation retreat recently with this guy Guruji, who is this Siddha Maha meditation master. This lineage has been passed down for thousands of years in India. And he was making this point during satsang, which is the part where you can ask any questions. He was like, you realize that all the technology in our bodies, including our mind, is the most powerful technology that has ever been developed in this universe that we know of. And it is.
Right. The second order effects of that technology is everything that we're seeing, right?
Right. I
just was listening to Jim O'Shaughnessy's podcast recently, and I didn't know this, and I think, and I read your book afterwards, but the fact that cooked food is one of the things that, the technology of fire led to cooked food, which led to further brain development, which led to the hockey stick of technological development.
Yeah, because you can eat a lot more calories as a result of cooked food. Now the problem is that we still, as John Mackey said on episode 30 of my podcast, the Love Conquers Fear podcast, our brains and our biology crave sugars because we so rarely got that.
Right.
And I think it was, I can't remember the episode number, but one of the episodes, the point was made that we would have to eat something like 15 sticks of sugar cane to get the amount of sweetener and like a single Coca-Cola, right?
Oh my God.
And so nobody's going to do that, right? And if you actually did do that,
the saber-tooth tiger would get you,
Well, yeah, you're getting, the saber-tooth tiger is going to be like, ooh, sweeter meat. But you're also going to get a lot of fiber. If you eat like an apple, it is perfectly balanced between sugar and fiber and vitamins. Nature is the ultimate maker of perfection. That's why the best products are designed around nature. And so, we need to evolve beyond profits over people. We need to be very intentional in this moment with AI, quantum computing, brain-computer interfaces, robotics rapidly accelerating, exponentially accelerating, and say, what kind of world do we want to create? And I think in this lifetime, we can create heaven on earth.
Well, I think, a lot there and a lot that I want to unpack in different pieces. I want to talk about I think the business model piece is a key thing because, the decision, back to social media and when it was ad-based, right? Mm-hmm. So then the major thing is, attention. Right. So I want to keep you on more. I want you back to the young girls thing. It's the comparison point. The longer you're comparing, the longer you're on, the longer you're getting ads. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's one of the things that I think is in bio and health. The biggest thing, especially as we are seeing such technological, all the things you mentioned in the book, like cures, preventative, longevity, et cetera, whatever, is that the business model needs to shift. And this is, I think you agree with this. None of this is conspiratorial. Everyone's like, I'm going to keep people in these kind of things. No, you have, Clayton Christensen's entire thesis is you can't have these large change from large organizations because they're structured in this way to optimize for X, Y, or Z. Right. And to say you need to optimize for A, that we've seen that 3 times ever kind of situation. But having a new model that takes innovation, you need to innovate this model. I don't have the answer necessarily to be okay, I make more money when you're healthier. Mm-hmm. Becomes a very different, then I'm going to be optimizing for different types of things, right? Versus the, purely, if you're on the drug, I make more money. And again, me, I came out of pharma in this kind of things. It works on the chronic disease situation, right? It works on the, I don't have a cure for it, I don't have it as long, but I can make your life better over time on the drug, then that's perfect. But then everything is put into that bucket versus the situation of well, I have we just saw Eli Lilly announced their, the cholesterol one shot. I am highly doubtful that is going to do well. And Eli Lilly, if anybody can do it, I think it's them because of GLP-1s, you're seeing business model shifts. But I'm doubtful of it because most one shots have failed historically because the large pharma companies are just trying to apply the old model to it. Right. And so great. So I'm going to have the price set at this, be able to do price increase over time, but that doesn't work on a one shot. Right. And if you're changing insurance every 18 months, the same thing. Well, if I pay for the one shot and then you switch over to you, then I didn't get any of the value of it. Right. So it has to look drastically different. And I don't have this is where we need innovation on these kind of situations. How do we have I frame a little bit into people of profits, but it's the aligned business models that say I'm doing really well as the business, you're doing well as a person. We're going to keep that then keeps going. That's how we have to evolve, what you're saying. But actually it's not true, I don't think, that it will make companies more money because Brian Hubbard made the case, these poor people in Kentucky, and this has happened all over America in these poorer communities, they were making $400,000 a person on keeping them addicted to opioids. Mm-hmm. And that was the infuriating part, right? Not mentioning all the other legal fees. I'm just talking about the pharmaceutical cost was an insane amount to literally keep, and all the hospital bills and all that stuff to keep people in an addictive state. And so, you've been dieting, and you look great, and I take good care of my body, and you don't spend more
Like I've stopped drinking alcohol. I stopped drinking alcohol a year and a half ago because of a psychedelic journey where I was seeing my body from above. And it was this 10-second part out of like a 4-hour journey where my soul said, you've transcended the need for this. It's just poisoning you and it's time to move on. And it was just like, I just snapped out of it. And that was so crazy because I was not even looking for that. I've never been an alcoholic, but I was honest with my doctors that I drink 4 to 6 cocktails a week, usually 5 to 6, because I'm been a CEO for 30 years. So in a very highly social type of environment. And, it's just all programming. It's like nobody chastises me for drinking mocktails now. I became a vegetarian 17 years ago. Like I had to get over my own programming of that. Originally people were like, oh, blah, blah. And then finally people instead got more intellectually curious. And I think I was transferring that because I was programmed. I grew up here in Texas. I was eating tons of barbecue, all that stuff.
Don't make me give
Long
a barbecue.
term, if we looked at societal cost, you're right. You're right. Like it's not great societally to keep people addicted to these things. There's externalities. And I'm not suggesting we go into this hyper-regulatory environment. I don't think that's the right answer either. I'm suggesting that we really focus on helping each other. And one of the things I'm super excited about with biotech, the space that you're in, is that as we decode more and more about consciousness and whatever this nature of the universe is, it's just like decoding space, like we invented GPS and everything else. So I think we're going to be able to decode consciousness to the point where we'll never truly understand what it is, because I think consciousness is fundamental and we're all fish swimming in the ocean. So we can't step outside of the ocean and objectively view it, but we'll be able to invent so many things to heal ourselves. And that is super exciting. I'm an investor in a number of companies that are already on that path.
Let's take the Mocktails example. So you're right, the 400,000, like they make that, but I don't think that's necessarily who's going to make money. You see, creative destruction all the time, right? Like,
Totally.
Kodak was making however much money they were, and then they were disrupted. And so while we see this kind of movement down of alcohol consumption, but it's a lot of like the Gen Z is one of the key drivers of it. I don't have numbers on this, but the mocktail market, I'm assuming, is going up, right?
It is actually in the functional, yes, absolutely, and the functional mushrooms alcohol replacement. Like I'm a big fan of this company, Little Saints. It's a female-owned brand, and I had this amazing dinner at our home on whether or not AI could ever become conscious, and I was really highlighting Mark Gober, and it was cool. I had a lot of AI experts at that dinner, and it really shocked me because I told Deborah, I was like, look, I'm going to, and I've done this at all dinner parties since I stopped drinking. I used to serve all these nice bottles of wine, and that was the only option. And now, or cocktails. Now I give the option of like amazing wine, like really nice bottles, or a mocktail made with Little Saints, which is using lion's mane. And lion's mane, it's not a psychedelic. It's just like a functional mushroom. I'm a big fan of Four Sigmatic and Taro.
Taro's been on the pod.
Good. Yeah, he's been on mine too. He is amazing. I've actually learned a lot from him. He recommended this book, Awareness, by Anthony DeMello to me, out of the 130 books he read on his soul quest. Oh my gosh, that book's a game changer. People should read that. He narrates it, and it's like listening to George Carlin, but he's a spiritual teacher in this case. But maybe George Carlin actually was very spiritual too. I mean, it's really, really funny, makes you laugh out loud, but it's very poignant. And, it really is an upper. Oh my gosh, like I drank too many cocktails that night, and I couldn't go to sleep till 2 a.m.
Oh my God, okay.
Because it's not like caffeine, but it's like a mental stimulant, and it makes the conversation so great, and you don't have that lethargic, feel.
Right.
So, but the thing that shocked me is 90% of the people attending that night chose the mocktail. And that's actually the stats that I've seen at every dinner party. It's around 80 to 90% of the time they choose the mocktail, even though I'm giving them $100 bottle of wine.
I think part of it's curiosity, right? Like in some of those things, I've tried, not those particular ones, but like different ones, because you're like, why not? It's here versus I've had the wine before or something. But yeah, and then the point thing is like that market's increasing. So you're able to, what the hope would be in transitions like in health or in these kind of things, where you might see a shrinkage in the overall TAM of the market, right?
Yeah.
And then you'll see, but then in this case, right, the mocktail market will go up considerably. Yeah. But then the consumer surplus goes to the people, right?
Yep.
And so I think you have that a lot. I mean, like, look, always drives me crazy when and my investment partner, when they're like, oh, well, we don't have enough money in healthcare. We're spending $5 trillion. Like, what? Like, we have money. It's going to the wrong places.
Yeah.
And if we change this, you're right. Maybe we'll end up spending only $2 trillion on healthcare, but be better. And some of those companies will make significant amounts of money in that new world, right?
Yeah, I do think you're right. I mean, you have a very good point. Look, it is better for everybody societally if people stay alive longer. And, we do have a declining birth rate, globally.
Yeah.
It is better if there are more humans. And I actually think, I have a theory on this, that as we approach the frontier of abundance and people realize that we're not in the Terminator or the Matrix scenario, and we're going to be able to transform ourselves, through biotech innovations, as well as just like more awareness and more evolution of ourselves as a species, that we are going to, and especially this next generation, is going to be like Neo in the Matrix, and it's going to create a population boom. And it's going to create, because one of the huge things that suppresses people having babies right now around the world is that they are afraid of being able to pay for things.
I think it's afraid of all of it. You're back to your fear. It's like it's fear I can pay for things, when you're like, people had 6 kids before, like 100 years ago and couldn't pay for anything. Or the doomerism of whether it be climate change, Terminator, whatever. The world's going to end. Why would you have kids? It's like, what are you talking about? Like,
and there should be a world where women and men can work on whatever they want to that creates some utility for society. It could be art, could be anything, education, could be capitalism, whatever it is, but be able to also have babies. I mean, the most beautiful act of creation is having a baby. It is literally like creating life together. And you've probably seen these videos where the sperm hits the egg and there's a spark of light. Those videos are like magical.
Yeah.
It's like so I mean, we have a lot of people that are just waiting. I'm a product of that. Like, one of the regrets I have in life, I have many regrets, and I think it's BS for people to say have no regrets, but I, one of the regrets I have is that Deborah and I were married for 8 years before we had kids. That was because of me being afraid that I wasn't going to be able to make it as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm not going to have the type of money that I need to be a provider, because we were very hand to mouth for the first 8 years of our marriage.
Right.
It took a long time to make any money.
Yeah, I remember when you were talking, I think it was at Nico Rexton's house, one of the first, and you were like, everybody now is like, oh, of course, Brett, you did the entrepreneur. You're like, for the first X number of years, you all thought I was an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing people say to me now is like, well, it's clearly you're someone that can meditate and become spiritual, et cetera, because you have money. And I'm always like, do you realize like the most spiritual people I've met around the world are also some of the most poor people I've ever met? Like the people I met in Kenya, Tanzania, in Bhutan. Bhutan's entire GDP is 3 weeks of coffee in the United States. That's one of the facts in the book.
Yeah, I remember you talking about like Bhutan, and they were the ones who did like the Global Happiness Index, right?
It's called Gross National Happiness, GNH. And they decided to, they saw the suffering in the West and in Western Europe and in the US. They saw the suffering, and they were just like, okay, these people have all the material abundance versus us, but they're not all, but they're much more depressed. And they realized that we were constantly programming ourselves to crave a bunch of shit that we didn't need, and that inner contentment, which, I'm Jewish, but I know you're Jewish too, but I mean, even if you're Christian, you're Buddhist, you're Islamic, whatever you are, like, all the mantras are the same. The kingdom of heaven is found within. That's Buddhism, that's Christianity. That's a direct quote from Christianity. But Judaism is the same. Like, we're trying to create tikkun olam. We're trying to repair the world.
I think part of it is almost the craving. You asked the whole like what happened in 1971 kind of situation. Like Tyler Cowen's hypothesis on what kind of the stagnation. And I think some of it is maybe just also the mission-driven nature of things. Like, to your point of, when we want to, it was like, well, I'm going to go donate here. I'm going to go, versus we lost some of the, well, I'm going to go build to make that better. Like I've referenced this many times in the podcast and how they incepted me on this. But when Base Power did their raise last year, and they had this whole they did physical newspapers here, the Statesman, and they did this whole ad campaign. It was the very the father and the son sitting on this hill overlooking kind of this nostalgic looking, but then it was like, the tagline was like, don't tell your grandkids you built B2B SaaS.
Oh,
and I just loved it. It was just like, look, we're solving these big problems. We're going, to build these. Obviously, you've been in enterprise, so like I'm not getting into that kind of thing. But just this moonshot mindset.
We should always
again.
be doing something,
right? And like back to the, like I've taken my kids down to see where the Starship launches. They're now asking, because now the new one's coming out. They're like, oh, so when's it going to be caught? Can we go see that one?
Yeah.
And so because we always we watched Artemis.
It's amazing
that moment where the astronaut, where she takes the picture of Earth with her iPhone, which I still think is funny that they're taking iPhones to space. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
We really can't get it out. We have to take these with us.
Right.
But like that moment, it's so human because you see it's out of focus and then it's in focus, and you just that connection, even though they're millions of miles away, or however far away the moon is, and you just you feel it. And then back to this this ability to see these big things and be inspired by them that we lost for about 30 or 40 years in terms we just went very
more than 50
small.
years to get back to the moon. We didn't even land on it. If you want to watch a great documentary with your kids, oh my gosh, I cannot recommend this one enough. It's called Unknown Cosmic Time Machine. And it's about the making of the James Webb telescope.
Oh, okay.
It's on Netflix. And I saw it. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely beautiful. Humanity can do hard things. It was just incredible.
And the pictures coming out of the Webb, are crazy,
unbelievable. And I was like, who directed this? It was an Israeli director, and it was a guy that made humanitarian films. I was like, that makes sense because it hit on every emotional chord. But yeah, the pictures. I mean, if people haven't looked up the pillars of creation.
Oh, I know the shot you're talking about. Yeah,
hands of God. Just so people know in terms of how cool it is that we're seeing this stuff, and the fact that we know now there are hundreds of billions of galaxies in the universe, and the cosmic time machine, the James Webb telescope, can see back 13.1 billion years, so almost to the theoretical beginning. One of those fingers in the pillars of creation, the Earth is 8,000 diameter. One of those fingers is 3 billion Earths.
Oh my God!
Just one, and the tip of those fingers have these red dots. Those are stars being born. That's what that is. And so, we
can't even imagine sometimes the scale of the universe.
You
try and
No, I mean, a galaxy breaks your brain.
Right.
Just a galaxy. And we have hundreds of billions of galaxies. So it's so crazy to think that we're the only life in a vast universe. I mean, it's like...
Well, there's two pieces to that, right?
I bet you the universe is teeming with life.
So you have the mathematical component of that, right? Of just... You do it out and you're like, there has to be, right? And I love the shift in narratives. Now, I'm assuming you've seen Project Hail Mary.
Yes.
Yeah, and
I read the book, actually.
I haven't read the book.
Sorry, I haven't seen the movie. I read the book.
See the movie.
Look, I've been working very freaking hard on this book. Okay, it's very intense. So I have very little time to watch TV or see movies.
Watch it with the family.
But I did listen to the book on Audible. Josh Bear actually was the one that recommended it. He's like, you gotta read this book, and it's so well acted on Audible. I know the movie's gonna be great. I'll see it when it comes streaming.
It's streaming now.
Good.
It is streaming now. So I watched it once in theater, and then we watched with the whole family.
That's a good tip, because Deborah and I are about to go on our 30th anniversary trip. We're going hiking in Ireland.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
I've never been there.
Yeah, but we're back to this, obviously, it's aliens are not out to destroy us, right? Like, it's this kind of that life.
Well, actually, I've got a
right?
whole theory on that too, because these movies, these documentaries, like Age of Disclosure, or this new not documentary,
the Spielberg movie,
Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
Now, what is it called? Disclosure.
I think it's called Disclosure. Yeah,
it's called Disclosure. These are in general like scary narratives.
Yeah.
Of we've lost control of the skies, et cetera, et cetera. Look, just think about this logically. If aliens are here, then they have conquered faster than light speed travel or interdimensional travel. If they have done that, then by definition, they could create faster than light speed weapons and interdimensional weapons, or interdimensional, however they traveled.
Right.
So they decide not to. They had to decide not to, because they would not be here. They would have destroyed themselves already. If you create faster than light speed weapons, it takes one maniac to destroy an entire civilization. And so it's just it's a ludicrous thought, I think, that they're here to harm us if they're here at all. And I think that there is something happening. I do think the veil is getting thinner between us and consciousness. I don't know if it's angels. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, it's here to help us. And it's here to help us because they've evolved their level of consciousness beyond ours. And I think that every species, I mean, this is what the lattice is about.
Yeah.
You know, my science fiction novella. I think, well, I guess it's right there. Every species gets to a point of evolution. This is a theory where they decide to allow love to conquer their fear and do the work and stop going after lazy prophets and start building a much more intentional society, stop hijacking themselves, or they destroy themselves. And that's the point we're in. You and I are in the lifetime right now where we either destroy ourselves or we make it through. And I'm 95% certain that we make it through, but it makes me not feel great that there's a 5% chance that we destroy ourselves through nuclear weapons or something like that.
Well, so if you think about that as like, that's the great filter, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and why we haven't seen it. Yeah, but even if you have a society, whether human, alien, whatever, that is, we'll call it on par good, right? Like in this situation, just back to almost statistically, I can't imagine that evil still exists. Like there's going, you know, even if you say like the aliens are here, whatever, like or not, and they are generally benevolent because of these things. I could not put down that like every single one of them on an individual basis, unless they are literally, you know, a singular hive mind, which that sets a whole different set of problems, right? You should watch Pluribus, by the way, as well.
I did.
Yeah. Okay. So you know,
I did watch that. Deborah was like, "Okay, this looks interesting," and it's okay. I mean, it's kind of a ridiculous show, but it has some interest.
It's interesting, yeah. Like so, like yeah. When Sarah and I get into a show, it's like 12:30 every night. Like we just binge these things.
I can't do that. I'm a very early riser.
We shouldn't do it.
I wake up with the sunlight. Yeah.
Yeah. We got into Landman. And did like that, and then Lioness were the two that we watched recently. And literally,
I'm a huge Taylor Sheridan fan. Huge. 1883 and 1923 they are like Titanic level great. They're better than Titanic.
Oh, okay, I guess we got to go. Like we've got into it recently. We got into Landman, and then we were recommended Lioness, and now
I haven't seen Landman or Lioness, but I'm telling you, 1883 and 1923 is the best TV I've seen in.
And those are the Yellowstone prequels, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
But they're Yellowstone after Yellowstone became big, so he has an unlimited budget, and it shows. I mean, Harrison Ford, Helen Mirren in 1883. You know, Sam Worthington in I've got it reversed. Sam Worthington in 1883 and Harrison Ford, Helen Mirren in 1923. It's just insanely good. It's insane. And we have an Austenite. Did you know we have an Austenite in 1883?
No.
Eric Baer. He used to be a tech executive. He used to be a tech entrepreneur. And he became an actor. And he's in 1883, a real prominent role.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've just destroyed my sleep. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Now,
Sorry.
When we get these shows.
A great
like,
one for couples, too. Both are just beautifully made.
Yeah.
Beautifully made.
No, the number one that we ever, like, Sarah still, have you seen Shogun?
I started to watch it. It's very Game of Thrones violent. I'm not a huge fan of that kind of violence.
It's not as violent as Game of Thrones.
I know.
There's violence. I will grant you on that.
It's like when they're burning the guy alive and stuff. There's stuff like that.
There is.
It messes me up.
But there's like, I do remember like you see some things that are like, they put, you're like, where'd the budget go? And this is like, you built like, you know, ancient Osaka. Like you clearly, I see where the money went.
Right. Yeah. It is very well made, and
the story is amazing. The language. You know,
again, I have to be very selective with my TV. So if it captures me. 1883 and 1923 before I was writing the book. So
see, the book. This
has been all encompassing. I mean, this has been 9 months of extremely intense work.
I can only imagine. Okay, so we'll get back to the book. We could obviously go on TV for a while. I want to talk about the super trifecta or the super.
The Superfecta.
Superfecta. It's four things.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, AI, robotics, quantum, and BCI.
Yeah.
And so from your perspective, like, okay, so why? I agree, but like in this, like. Yeah. Why are these fundamentally different than the technologies that come before that actually, you lump these together because I think there are other technologies we're seeing as well that kind of create this moment that we're in.
Yeah. Well, so AI is like the invention of electricity. It fundamentally changes every industry and it shatters the barrier to creativity. robotics is the physical manifestation of AI. And there's just no doubt we're going to have, caretakers for older people that are robots that, seem very human-like, can lift, people to go to the bathroom, et cetera, et cetera. And quantum computing is going to dramatically accelerate everything. I mean, like I was at TED. I go to TED every year. I love TED. And I was at TED the year where Harmit Nevin, and it's in the book, he announces the new Google Willow chip. And the Google Willow chip processes in 5 minutes a very complex calculation that would take a classical computer, which classical computers are ones and zeros, on or off, where qubit is in a superposition state. It can be a 1 or a 0 or neither or both.
Yep.
It's really wild, like how that works. And so they're
Quantum still gives me a headache.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, we manifest our reality. There's a whole different aspect of that too that we can get into with quantum. We're in a quantum field. We know that that's real. Higgs boson proved that that's real at CERN. And the quantum computer, this quantum chip Willow, can do this calculation in 5 minutes, which a classical computer, it would take it 10 to the septillion years, which is a 10 followed by 25 zeros, which is 732 trillion times the known age of our universe. And Harmit Nevin is on stage. And he said, the only thing we can figure out at Google is this is computing in a different dimension. And it was one of those moments where my brain just went.
I don't even know what that means.
Well, I think we live in a multidimensional reality. I think that the quantum field is where we come from. And it is, you and I sitting here are 99.129s of empty space.
Right.
Because we're made out of atoms.
Yeah,
Everything in here is made out of atoms. And as we get further and further down, to the smallest, possible thing.
Literally the rabbit hole.
Right. The Planck scale is supposedly the smallest, but I'm sure it goes beyond that.
I'm sure we'll keep going.
And, it's named after Max Planck. And Max Planck, became very spiritual as a result of his discoveries in quantum physics. So did Einstein, actually. Einstein, people like to say he was an atheist. He was very clear. He said, I want to be very clear, I'm not an atheist.
The famous line, God doesn't throw dice.
Right. So but a lot of people tried to claim that he is. And so these two became more spiritual, when they had these discoveries. But it was at that same TED that Demis Hassabis said, Chris Anderson was pushing him on, like, why are you trying to invent all these things with AI? And he said, I want to understand the nature of our reality at a Planck scale resolution. And Demis has doubled down on that many times since.
Yeah.
Like he had a really interesting thread on X recently with Elon Musk where they were both saying they were up late at night trying to figure out what the reality that we exist in is. And I think that these technologies, including brain-computer interfaces, are going to allow us to decode more and more of our reality. Now, in the lattice, I hypothesize that even by the year 2085, we don't fully understand the nature of God. I don't think we can ever fully understand the nature of God. I do believe that God is the definition of love, infinite love for us all, unconditional love for us all, unconditional love for creation, the spark that created the Big Bang. Consciousness and God to me are synonymous. I don't think God is some great big white man in the sky. I think that it's the fundamental structure that created this universe that we're in. And, all of us want to understand the nature of reality. And one thing that's so funny that I get a lot of pushback on the theme abundance is people will say, and this especially my capitalist friends, and I'm a capitalist, I'm a proud capitalist, I'm a conscious capitalist, but I'm a proud capitalist. And they'll say to me, well, Brett, once we get to this level of abundance, what are we going to do? Are we just all going to meditate like the Bhutanese? And I always say, well, first of all, you're assuming that's a bad thing. I was like, they're much happier than the average American. I was like, secondly, you're thinking too small. Like abundance on one planet, there are hundreds of billions of galaxies out there. And
there's always stuff to build.
There's always stuff to build. And I'm one of those eternally curious people. I think you are too. And, let's go find out if we can build faster in light speed travel. Let's reconcile what quantum science and classical science are. We haven't done that even. We think we're so sophisticated and the stakes are so high for us to make it through this, as you said, the great filter, because we are very landlocked on this planet. As you were discussing earlier, it took us more than 50 years to get back to the moon.
Right.
We only know what 4% of our universe is even made of. We call that matter. We don't know what 96% is. We call it dark energy and dark matter.
It's a math problem right now. You're like, this math doesn't work. We'll just call it dark matter, dark energy, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and I mean, this is where it's so exciting, that SpaceX is going public, and by the time people see this, I guess it'll probably be public by then. And yeah, I mean, man, it's just we're such an exciting.
But like when you compare now to, I don't care when, just go back in time. We are in an age of abundance comparatively, right? Like when you weren't in subsistence farming, when you weren't
100%.
There's still stuff to build. We're building more. We're asking deeper questions.
That's in the book, right?
Yeah.
In the conclusion of the book, you may remember that in the conclusion, there's a line about the fact that 250 years ago, again, we've been around for 300,000 years, Homo sapiens. 250 years ago, 90% of humanity did not know how to read. 80% lived in abject poverty.
Right.
So as much as people douse on capitalism, yes, we should stop putting profits over people. Okay, it really matters what kind of society we're building. At the same time, like capitalism has lifted us out of starvation and poverty. Not everybody. Like, I personify in the book the country of Chad. And Chad, only 1 in 8 people have electricity today in Chad. Only 1 in 8 in 2026, There's 21 million people there. It looks beautiful. If you go look on Google Images at images of Chad, it looks like a place you'd want to visit if it had roads and if it had the ability for you to visit in a way where it'd be comfortable for you. That doesn't yet exist, but it can. We can create abundance on Chad.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. So one of the pieces in the book that when you're talking about Chad, and I don't know enough details about Chad specifically and some of whether the governmental structures or aid, but I'm going to make a general assumption. So correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you at one point said okay, not necessarily the UN, but if we had an NGO putting out abundance, that kind of format. I recoiled a bit at that structure because this is what we do now, especially in things like they're not doing well, right? They're not these structures are not rather than actually allowing something like capitalism to flourish there in the markets and say, go build, and then you can create this. And so when you have this, when we have the abundance, it even now where you have, you look at this, it was you had the Gibson quote, right? The future's here is unevenly distributed.
Right.
And you're seeing things like, okay, we're going to have the data center moratorium, or New York is we are going to let 8 Waymos here.
Yeah.
No, I see 8 walking down the street, and so
I'm aligned with you on all that. I mean, I think that I think this narrative of we don't want a data center in our neighborhood, et cetera, is really not productive. This fear of capitalism, et cetera. The tension is something I've learned to embrace as an Austinite. I grew up here, as you know, born in 1972. And I used to think that our city council was so ridiculous growing up. I was like, why are they trying to make people stop moving here? It makes no sense to me intuitively. I will say, though, that as I got older, I realized that the tension between what I'll say the artist class and the capitalist class has led to a beautiful Austin.
Yes.
Dallas, capitalist won 100%, and it is just nothing but a concrete jungle. I mean, it's not a very nice place, in my opinion. Whereas Austin, people come here and they're like, oh my gosh, it's beautiful, et cetera. Well, that was through the tension. But I am a capitalist.
The tension or the convergence?
I think the convergence is a better way to say it, yeah. But it was tension because both of them hated each other as well.
Oh, I'm not saying there isn't tension.
Yeah.
But I wonder if the positive things come more out of the convergence of it, right?
But Chad, going back to Chad, I was on a hike this morning with John Kadinda, who came from Kenya and is an energy expert. And he was on the Love Conquers Fear podcast, and somewhere in the first 10 episodes, I think he was episode 9 or something, maybe 8 but he and I were having this long talk about Chad this morning. Again, he doesn't know much about Chad. Africa is just an insanely big continent.
Yeah.
They actually distort it on maps because it'd be so big that they showed it actually true to size. But Chad, we were talking about it, and he actually was the one that made me realize, it was actually that episode we were recording, that it was probably going to be an entrepreneur, not an NGO. Come into Chad, use robots to build the pipelining they needed for clean water, the healthcare abundance that they needed, the food abundance that they needed, et cetera, the electrical, wiring, all of that. And so, but again, I think that what was happening on that Uber drive that I talk about in the introduction with Calibou, I talk about, I think, in chapter 2, the chapter on abundance, with Calibou, who picked me up at 4:30 in the morning on the way to give this speech at MIT to this gathering of CEOs that meets there every year, is that I was like, there's no real hope for Chad unless the costs get to a point where it makes financial sense. Like Jamie Metzel made a really good point on my podcast on episode 18. He wrote this book, The AI 10 Commandments, recently. It's a great book. And Jamie said, we already have enough abundance to feed everybody on the planet today. It's just not distributed.
Right.
Well, it's not distributed because which company is going to say, I'm going to ship food over to Chad when nobody can pay for the food? Their GDP is $660 a person. So we have to get to a point through this exponential curve with AI, quantum computing, robotics, where things get so cheap, there's so much abundance that we can create abundance in a place like Chad. And if we can create abundance in Chad, we have created heaven on earth, because that means everywhere else is like, that's starting at the toughest place to start at. And, one of the things I love about Jeff Cardenas, the CEO of Apptronic, he was on my podcast recently for an episode.
Jeff, you have an open invite here.
Yeah. It's an episode that'll launch in the future, probably after this comes out. But Jeff, he's starting with really, really, really hard problems at Apptronic, like a really hard problem. And it's so smart, because if you aim at a hard problem, like Elon Musk aimed at reusable rockets, that's a freaking hard problem. NASA was never able to solve that. Now, NASA did lead to the James Webb telescope, so it's not like NASA can't do hard things, but they couldn't figure that one out. And that was where capitalism, provided. And oh my gosh, it's unbelievable to see Starship launch. I mean, it's unbelievable. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to go see it live?
I've only seen it streaming.
Oh, you got to go.
I am going to go. We are investors in SpaceX. We've been.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it'll be great for everybody when it goes public. One thing that people don't realize, this is a pretty stunning stat, but when Tesla came to Austin, the reason they originally came here is that it would take 1.5 years to build the Giga Texas factory versus 6 years in California.
I think 6 is even,
and it's really stunning. This is a 2-year-old stat. I don't know what the number is today, but 2 years ago, Tesla had 23,000 employees in Austin. Number 2 was Dell at 11,000. Prior, Dell was the biggest private employer.
I think, the last numbers I looked at, it was like, I think they cut some, so they like at 3, and like the HEB might be number 1. But the point being, like, I get in little bits of debates about the whole economic development thing, because I think that, like, okay, it's fantastic if people move, if companies move here, like, not knock that at all. But the transformative effect, I think, on economic development happens when it's really in like industry,
right?
Because it's only like Tesla moving here that you can go from 0 to 20,000 people in 3 years, right? If XYZ company moves here, and like, again, I want them all to move here. So like, I'm not, it's like, okay, we have 100 execs here. We have and it'll be stable, but it isn't like growing versus, when the Optimus factory gets built, that's another X number. And then who knows where the TerraFab is going to end up.
That's super exciting. Yeah. I mean, I think we are in the most exciting time in Austin's phase. I mean, I told you that when we recorded for the first time, and it becomes more and more true as we go. And you've been putting out really good content on LinkedIn and other places on this as well. I mean, we are in the next 10 years are going to be the best 10 years yet. But I said that 10 years ago. It was true too.
But that's good. But I love, like, I think it's why you and I get along so well is the best day in Austin's tomorrow.
Yes.
And it drives me crazy. Like if you were here during the night, I'm sure the 90s were great. For the 80s were great, 70s, except like all these time periods in Austin. But this consistent, like, and I just crossed, back in December, the 5-year mark. So it's like, that's supposed to be, like, guys, it was great when I first got here. And I was like, no, it's better tomorrow. And like, that's the thing that's
no, there was a time, I mean, I grew up as kind of like a new wave kid. I was programming since I was 7. I got really into new wave music. I was going dancing at nightclubs till like 3, 4 in the morning. And I saw like literally skinheads beating up black people downtown.
Oh man.
In alleys. I was like super terrified. downtown was super dangerous in the 80s, super dangerous. Like I could have lost my life downtown. So lot has changed. I mean, still we have crime and stuff like that. And,
there's still things to fix.
Yeah, but society depends on, you got to support police. There's like obvious things. And Austin, there is a side of Austin politically that has really weird views on things like that.
Yes.
And that's not a right or left comment. I'm very independent, but to build a good society, you have to be honest about what a good society actually needs. And policing is one of those things where it's very, very important. Now, yes, all things can go too far, but I have not personally seen policing go too far in Austin. No. I think if anything, we have actually backslided on that. We need to support our police.
100, absolutely no argument there. There's a lot. Yeah, when you think about just the homeless situation, the crime situation, all of that gets back to like you start with having just safe, and you can walk around, and then you can go do back to Maslow's hierarchy, right? Then you can go do the other things, right?
Yeah. But I'm telling you, growing up here, being born in 1972, the 80s were terrifying downtown. It was they were cool too, because it was like 80s music was like great and
right.
stuff. But I saw things downtown that scarred me a bit. Like really, it was very scary. There were like really serious like gangs of skinheads, stuff like that, like going around like terrorizing people. It was pretty bad because we didn't have enough police. My dad actually, my parents have been entrepreneurs since the time I was born, and they had downtown businesses. And my dad, he was constantly helping the police out. And we had screwed up city council and all that stuff, and we still have our challenges.
Yes. I want to get back to the book because there's a particular framework that you had that I thought was interesting, because I've also built a similar-ish framework. It was your wizard prophet framework.
Yeah.
And one, I want you to kind of explain it, and then I want to bounce it off of I have it called the builder, storyteller, philosopher framework, and I think they align a lot. But and then the last piece, I'm going to throw a lot at you this. What I find interesting was you talk about like the merger of the kind of the wizard and prophet is getting to our narratives and love conquers fear. A lot of the builders, the wizards, as you kind of put it, are the most doomerish. I mean, you put in like something about you like Dario's, like, and some Sam stuff, and like it's like some of this, like when you say like the permanent underclass and all the job, I'm like, what are you doing? And then you have that realm of, I don't think the Terminators have these things, but I think, did you see that study that came out that I think it was Anthropic put out, that some of the negative tendencies of the model is because it's been trained on the doomer narratives that have been put out there. Mm-hmm. It's like, we are literally, sending it in this direction by giving into fear.
All right. Well, and most science fiction actually is rooted in dystopia. That was why I read a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it drives me crazy.
Let's give kind of, Isaac Asimov wrote more positive sci-fi.
Yes. And you can still have villains in these kind of things and have it be positive.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. And in the Lannis, that we never, fear continues to rear its head.
Yeah.
There is no completely conquering fear. It's a constant chase, but we are highly unregulated today. I'm talking about internal. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a massive rise of depression and loneliness. And I think that society is like starting to self-correct. And again, we need these scientific breakthroughs through, biotech to allow us to regulate better. But, I actually have a different view. Like, I think that what Dario Amodei is putting out and Sam Altman, like, Dario Amodei's The Adolescence of Technology, these are deeply thoughtful pieces to help us wake up and help us realize we really need to meet this moment with great intentionality, because every technology, starting with the discovery of fire, can be used for bad or good. Now, Byron Reese made a really good point on my podcast. He's like, look, if people are so bad, then how are we still here? Because he said in a small village, thousands of years ago, you could have thrown a dead goat in the well that everybody drank the water from, and it would kill the whole village. And so I do agree with Byron that most of humanity is wired for good, but every technological movement becomes an amplifier for either more abundance or more destruction. And the scariest outcome to me is that it was really shocking for me to find this out, and I've asked this to many audiences at this point, including many guests that have been on the Love Conquers Fear podcast, is that we have 13 100,000 nuclear weapons today in the world. And you know this from the book, so I'll just say it instead of ask you. But the amount of nuclear weapons that it would take to destroy all the major and medium-sized cities in the world and send us into nuclear winter. It's like the Matrix. Remember the part they busted through the clouds and saw the sunlight, like, and create a nuclear winter where we all suffer in the freezing cold for a decade. It's only 2%.
Right.
So we have 50 times more. And if you and I were aliens and we were visiting Earth and we were like, well, what does humanity call this? Humanity calls this mutually assured destruction, which the acronym for that is MAD. So we have an insanity that we need to cure. And that insanity is one which is an insanity of the amygdala, which again is our fear-based center, which served us and serves us sometimes. But the ultimate thing that serves us is when we operate from a place of love. And that's in all the spiritual text. Doesn't matter if you believe in God or not. That's also in Stoicism. Like, even if you don't believe in God, I understand. But having that ability to regulate, like, and realize that we're 99.9% genetically identical on this planet, all this ridiculous argument over my religion versus your religion, my race versus your race, men versus women, my country versus your country, et cetera, et cetera. Like, let's lead from the heart. I love visiting Japan. There's so many cool cultural aspects of that. I'm not saying people give up their culture and we become like pluribus.
Right.
But I'm saying that, we need to analyze all parts of our culture that aren't led from the heart. And if you think about all the things that we truly love in life, they're led from the heart. Even competition, like even seeing a great football game or a great basketball game or something, like the ones that move you the most are the ones where they win at the end, but then they lead from the heart, versus the one where they win and they act like an asshole to the other team, right?
I'm not a giant tennis fan. I watch some, and I still the Rafael Nadal, Federer, Wimbledon game that came down to sunset. I still remember that game and and how Nadal collapsed afterwards and you saw that heart.
We are big tennis fans. We usually go to the U.S. Open. We actually went with Josh and Amy Bear this past U.S. Open last year, and we really we love those types of stories, right? Because that's the best of humanity.
Yeah.
And that's within us all. And these constructs of keeping us in these mind prisons to have us fear each other, have us hate each other, amplified by social media and the media, we just have to realize that's not serving us. And it's not serving us. Obviously, it's not serving us because we're struggling with all this loneliness and depression. And that dopamine hit, or whatever that hit is, of just waiting for someone to respond to you on social media so you can say another crushing thing, is just ridiculous. And everybody listening to this knows what I'm talking about because they've been caught up in that at one point in time. I've been caught up at that at one point in time. Me walking the spiritual path has allowed me to step outside of that. And I'm so much happier now as a result. It doesn't mean I'm perfect. I am constantly a work in progress. And I think everybody is. I don't think there's any state of enlightenment where you're now like the Dalai Lama. I bet you the Dalai Lama is not even like the Dalai Lama. I'm sure has times of uncertainty or fear or whatever. That's part of the test in this world of form for our souls to grow lifetime to lifetime and manifest more and more love. And we're in the penultimate moment. I mean, part one of the lattice, I talked about it in Love Conquers Fear book, is that we are in God's final exam. God wants us to make it. God loves us all unconditionally. And we're in the final exam on whether or not we're going to become one of the keystone species in the universe to propagate the rest of the universe with love. The universe will not give us entrance. We will be landlocked forever if we do not allow love to conquer fear. So it's up to us.
How do we think of the stories we tell each other? And it's funny because I've been doing better on social media, and it's funny because I'm generally very, very optimistic. I don't like the dunks. I don't like the that kind of thing. I consume it and that's probably a whole other thing. I definitely I enjoy X for different things in the knowledge space and that. But I get sucked into those rabbit holes, as we all do. But I just think there is this moment now that I think that, to your point, that I think that love is winning because you see the optimistic narratives. Part of it I call the inspiration innovation loop. You want to see these things. Yeah. Back to where Project Hail Mary doing so well because it's like it is a fundamentally positive story.
It's very positive, yeah.
Right? And
I love that. I love that book.
And so, yeah, so you see these kind of these types of things kind of coming, and I think it's been an interesting, like the box office this year has been very interesting with the things, the slop that isn't doing well versus the unique stuff that is, and the hope that is kind of doing. And I think there's this moment now for these narratives to change and be able to say like we can build, we can do these kind of things versus the very zero sum mentality.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that doing my podcast, when I started the podcast, which I've recorded 66 episodes of now, I originally thought this is going to make me less optimistic because I thought I'm so optimistic about humanity. I love humanity. I thought this probably is going to make me less optimistic, but it'll make me more informed, and I'll get to do essentially market research and let people learn alongside me, which will create a much better product in the book and transform me as well. And it actually made me more optimistic.
That's great.
Which is really interesting, you know.
You like to be surprised at the upside. It's always good there.
I was really surprised that it did, including even the people that are more fearful, like Chris Himes. You know, Chris is an amazing friend. Episode 57, a lot of people like that episode. He left.
I don't know how you keep all the episode numbers straight. Like I can't.
I've got a good memory. Yeah, he left. You know, Indeed, to work at Houston Tillotson, teach an AI responsibility course, which is incredible. He's total mensch, and it's a great course, and people can take it online. He opened it up, you know, with their permission, and you know that episode, there's a lot of healthy tension in that episode because he is for sure much more concerned than I am. But I think I helped him grow as well in that episode. I think we helped each other grow. Because look, it's not that what he's saying is wrong. It's just that I think that we are already waking up to meet the moment. And I think we're in the process of waking up for that. And I actually believe that there is something spiritual going on. Now, if you do not take a spiritual approach to this, you could just say, look, there's something about natural selection we don't understand, that consciousness, whatever that is trying to collectively wake us up so we don't extinct ourselves. But I actually think that God is working through us. I think we are the hands of God, and that God is waking us up. Now, you know, maybe it's also these UAPs and other things like that are happening that's trying to wake us up. Whatever it is like, we are waking up more and more to meet the moment. And I do think that this kind of Hollywood narrative about just how bad we are,
right,
and how, you know, I think that people are going to turn off on that more and more as we continue to wake up, because what's going to happen as we approach the frontier of abundance is we're going to see more and more at a faster and faster clip of humanity can do really hard things. Yeah. And it's going to force our leaders and citizens around the world to put pressure on each other to say, what kind of world do we want to create now that we have these constructs breaking down? I'll give you a great example. Like, if we decode the energy of the sun, which I really believe will happen in the next 10 to 15 years, 18 seconds of the sun's rays that fall on Earth, 18 seconds would power America's energy needs today for over a year. 18 seconds. Yeah, it's in the chapter on climate change and energy. I think that's chapter 5 of the book. And that would be absolutely miraculous, right? And if we did that, then, you know, as my friend Pablos Holman said in his book, which I quote from, it would be like the base of the Maslow hierarchy. Like, everything starts with the sun.
Right.
Everything. Like, we have no life on Earth without the sun. The sun is the life giver. And, you know, that will support everything. And so if we have unlimited energy around the world, you can desalinate everywhere. Yep. You can run robots, you know, 24/7 to go do all the hard things that we're never going to be able to create that in Chad because there's no money there.
Right.
And so
you can go put vertical farms, which are like, is a nice idea, but it's so much driven by like its energy and water and like that. Like, I can just forget shipping to Chad. I can just drop that farm because if I've got infinite energy, done. Yeah. Easy.
So think about this from a God point of view, just for a second. Like, we're peering over God's shoulder, you know, just to hypothesize about it. Like you create a world where you basically have to invent everything from scratch. You know, you have nothing, you're on a savannah, et cetera, and you're like freezing in the winter and all this stuff. So you have to discover fire, you have to build all of these technologies. And then you reach this penultimate point where you build the technology to create abundance for everyone on the planet. And then are you really going to be dumb enough as a collective species to say that's the point where we press the button and destroy ourselves? Or do you say like, oh my gosh, there's so much at stake. We could do almost anything we want in the universe. Yep. And, you know, I had a guest on the podcast, Peter Wang, you know, the co-founder of Anaconda, which is one of our unicorns here. And I was kind of joking around because I didn't know the answer to this. And he can't know the answer to this either. So we're both just hypothesizing. But I said, Peter, I was like, maybe we figured out 2 to 3% of what we can figure out with science today. There's so much at stake. He's like, Brett, we figured out less than 1%. He's like, trust me, we don't know hardly anything.
Yeah.
And that's exciting, you know? Like we can.
There's the people,
so many
I agree with you. There's the people who are like, oh, we don't know anything, how we do, versus like, look how much we've done. Like, I'll take Peter's number. At 1%, look at what we've been able to do, right?
Like I said, just in the past 250 years. Like, so think about if we can survive for another 250, which I think we will. And what is life going to be like 250 years from now? If you and I could like jump into a time machine and go 250 years from now, it would be unrecognizable to us, I think. I don't think we'd be able to recognize it. I think it would break our brain. And it would break the brain of people 250 years ago if they were able to teleport into 2026. They'd be like, we have these things called grocery stores, and you can get these things called blueberries and many different types of blueberries. And what is this thing? This phone thing?
There was a great meme. It was something like from like X period to Y. Yeah. It was like horse-drawn carriage. Like that was it. It was still there. Right. And then like in 100 years, you're like the horse-drawn carriage and like the you know, supersonic flight, right? Or SpaceX or whatever one you want to use, and how fast we've come just in that 100 years.
Yeah.
We can obviously spend, as we always do, like hours more dissecting.
Yeah, sure.
So, but I think it's a good point. Look, so when looking at what's next, we're going to not jump so much 250, but bring it back. Like, what is the next kind of like hinge point trend thing that you're looking at that will kind of be kind of a defining moment?
I mean, obviously, there's the
besides the publication of your book.
Yeah, I mean, there's the obvious. Well, I'm really concerned about humanity overall. I'm thinking about this comes from a deep place for humanity, a deep love for all of humanity. I think, you know, there's obvious things of the creation of AGI and then ASI, artificial superintelligence, and I think open source is going to win. So I'm watching the proliferation of open source. I think very interesting. The Chinese really led on that front. You know, when President Trump announced Project Stargate last year on January 21st, you couldn't script this better. January 20th is where DeepSeek announced R1, open source model, which a week later, NASDAQ lost $1 trillion of market cap, led by NVIDIA, because people are like, oh my gosh, like this whole thing's going to go open source. Right. So I think
market's recovered a bit since then.
What's that?
Market's recovered a bit since then.
It totally has. And look, NVIDIA deserves all the accolades it's got, and it's an amazing company. The hardest thing that humanity has ever invented by far are computer chips. I mean, they're like little miniature.
Which we turned sand into intelligence. Yeah.
On a chip. I mean, it's unbelievable. So you know, I'm paying attention to that. I think open source will win. I'm paying attention to quantum computing. I think that's going to become stable by 2029 or 2030. That's going to accelerate everything for our progress. Like real world modeling is really hard for today's supercomputers to do. We need to solve cancer. We need to solve all types of things. I think we can create a healed jewel in Earth, you know, clean up all the garbage and replenish the ozone layer. But we need to figure out how to get there. Quantum computing is going to accelerate that, you know, solving all disease. Robotics is super interesting because we need the cognitive labor that comes with robotics. We really do. There's so many things. I mean, just imagine if you and I could kind of point to a hill on a property and say, could you just go and construct, you know, this building with perfect precision, and you have 200 robots that are powered by the sun, just go off and do that.
We can do that in the digital space right now with Claude Code and those things, and imagine the same space.
Exactly. You nailed it. It's always easier to do things with bits than it is atoms. You know, that's a Mike Maples Jr. quote. And then brain-computer interfaces, I think, is going to lead to us decoding the biggest mystery of all, which is the nature of reality. And, the first part of Lattice came through a psychedelic journey where I was like, how is science and spirituality going to come together? We have to scientifically prove that science and spirituality are two sides of the same coin. And I think we're going to do that. I really do. I think consciousness is fundamental. More and more people are saying that. Even Christoph Koch, in Michael Pollan's new book, A World of Peers, about the nature of consciousness, and Christoph Koch is writing lots of articles on this now. He was a hardcore materialist and like, nothing to see here, consciousness just manifests by the brain, and we're gonna show you exactly how that works. And then he did his own psychedelic journey, and he's like, oh my gosh, consciousness is fundamental. Like he got to see a glimpse of what it actually is. And once you do that, and again, it doesn't have to be psychedelics. It could be that you have a spontaneous spiritual awakening, that you get there through meditation, or you have a near-death experience, which I wouldn't wish on anybody, but like people have had a near-death experience. A lot of times that's very transcendent about the nature of our reality. And then, if we could prove that scientifically to the world, then the two things would come together, and that would actually be helpful for all the constructs, whether it's political party constructs or, again, racial constructs or country constructs, to realize like, hey, we actually come from light and love. That's our actual reality. That would be, that would be the biggest discovery ever. If we prove that, that would be the biggest discovery ever. And I think we will. Now, I don't think we'll understand the nature of God. I don't think it's possible to fully understand that. But I think we're going to find that out through brain-computer interfaces. I think that, of course, there's the obvious thing about brain-computer interfaces.
Right.
Like Elon Musk says, we'll cure blindness. I agree. We'll figure that out. These are just input mechanisms. Yeah. We'll figure out how to cure all types of, we've already figured out how to cure things for quadriplegics, but we haven't yet figured out how to make their limbs work again, right? And so there's just so much possibility, and it's the most exciting time to be alive. The next 10 to 15 years, this is my project for the next 10 to 15 years. I want to see humanity make it to the other side of this. And then, oh my gosh, our future is going to be so great. Maybe you and I will be hopping in a spaceship and we'll go to see, some of these things that you can see in the James Webb telescope. First, we need to solve faster than light speed travel because things are really far away.
They're working on it. I love it. And
Yeah.
that's the optimists unite
Exactly.
from a place of love. I love it.
Totally.
Brett, thank you for coming back on the podcast.
Yeah,
I'm sure
thank
we'll
you.
do round 5.
Yeah, thanks for reading the book too.
Oh, that's great.